Well, we got a great program prepared for you today. Gary Marcinick is the Executive Vice President of Business Development at Boudros, Rulin & Rowe. A lot of you know Jim Boudros, one of our members. He has enjoyed more than 30 years as a financial industry leader in the area of business development and relationship management. He currently serves on the board of directors for the Zoo, the Board of Commissioners for the Greater Columbus Sports Commission, and on the board for Lindy Infant Foundation. He's a life member of Nationwide Children's Hospital Development Board. He lives in Dublin with his wife Jill, and they have 2 grown sons. And he's going to be here today to talk to us about NIL. Some of you are like, what is NIL? Well, we're going to tell you. He is the founder of the COHESION Foundation here in Central Ohio, which is a group that's been, he founded to help with this NIL initiative as it relates to Ohio State and probably some other places. Now, what's not on Gary's bio.
We've known each other a long time.
Yes.
This is Gary now.
Gary played for the Buckeyes as a wide receiver behind. Does anybody know who the famous receiver was in 1984? You got it. Chris Carter. So he played back up to Chris Carter. Now, don't say anything because NIL deals existed back then. They just weren't public like they are now. It was rumored that Chris Carter also received a Mercedes, just like C.J. Stroud, and Gary got a ham sandwich and a 6-pack of Tab Cola.
Yeah, if that.
So,
if that.
Yeah. And Gary's asked for more of a dialogue discussion format today rather than just being a presentation, so that's what we're going to do. So anything you want to tell us about yourself that I missed?
No, I think that's it. Mike and I go way back. We have many mutual friends, so that was pretty. That was G-rated. That was nice. That It was such a civil.
I was
civil
also
introduction.
on the 1984 Ohio State football fan club.
Yeah.
So
is this working actually? Okay. I'll hold it up if that's okay.
So tell us, what is NIL for those of us who don't know what that is?
Okay, so NIL stands for name, image, likeness. July of 21, there was law enacted which essentially allows a college athlete to monetize their name, image, and likeness. So it allows a college athlete, formerly amateur athlete, to profit on their celebrity, their name, their image, their likeness. So that all came about starting in California in July of 21.
Okay. And what is your background? How did you get involved with this whole thing?
I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it's PTSD so far. I've been around the football program for almost 40 years in one form or another. So I've built trust and a good relationship with, I knew Woody. Woody was still around. Earl, Coach Cooper, Fickle, Urban, Ryan Day, of course, Tress. So I've been around. I formally endowed a scholarship with Rick Nash. Rick Nash is a good friend of mine. Rick and I endowed a football scholarship about a dozen years ago. So just have been around the program, and I was asked to take a leadership position in this space purely as a volunteer. So I think that's really important to know before we get to the Q&A, that friendly fire. I do this purely for volunteer purposes, as is my entire board. We are all volunteers. We don't take a penny, a nickel, a trip, nothing. There's no dilution of our efforts whatsoever to help foster success in this area for Ryan Day, the entire athletic program as a whole.
So you got Rick Nash to donate money to fund a football scholarship.
Yeah, exactly. Hockey.
Wow,
so
that's impressive.
Rick's actually, I've worked with Rick since he was 19, and he's a huge Ohio State, very passionate Ohio State supporter. He married a gal from Dublin, so they love Ohio State football, so it's just kind of a nice thing to do.
So where did COHESION Foundation come from?
Yeah, so COHESION Foundation, in entering this space, we thought a 501c3. Ryan is very intentional in intent on making this a positive to the Central Ohio community. So the 501c3, our mission statement is to be a very trusted resource to educate athletes, not just give them a fish, but teach them how to fish and keep the fish, and connect them with local charities. You know, if they're gonna enter into these pseudo employee contracts, why not do good work? Why not ingrain good habits for them and benefit the Central Ohio community as a whole? So we are a 501c3 in process of applying for a tax-exempt status in our space. So that's kind of our space in this NIL.
And are you just doing Ohio State football, or will this do other sports and other athletes?
You know, our aspiration is there's 36 varsity sports at Ohio State. As everyone knows, the football engine pulls the other 35 cars. So as Ohio State football succeeds or prospers, that is a direct trickle-down effect to the benefit of every other varsity sport and every other athlete at Ohio State. So we have to get football right. We have to keep football on this plateau that we've kind of been spoiled with. I mean, this is really what it comes down to. You know, we've been spoiled to the standard of BCS and Final Fours and competing for national championships. So that's a long answer. My board, you can go to our website, COHESIONFoundation.com, and you could explore who our board members are. You would recognize many names. You know, the McConnell family is committed to our efforts. Jack Nicholas, Jack and Barbara are committed to our efforts. Archie Griffin and his family are committed to our efforts in Cohesion Foundation. So we aspire to provide tools for every athlete at Ohio State to kind of monetize their name, image, and likeness. You know, as you mentioned, I was a walk-on, so that's analogous to an extra in a movie. I mean, I technically wasn't Chris's backup. I was a backup to Chris's backup, and maybe one other backup. No, I was like, but I've always been like my space at Ohio State. I was a walk-on football player, so I was the underdog. So I am all about, you know, this everything that C.J. Stroud is enjoying. That's not reality. Don't paint the whole space with how C.J. Stroud is prospering. He is the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy. 98 or 99% of not only the Ohio State athletes, but athletes around the country are not enjoying those benefits. That's just an aberration that CJ's enjoying. But we're trying to equip and provide opportunities for everybody, is what it comes down to. And actually, there's roughly 1,000 athletes at Ohio State. A large portion of those athletes are not on scholarship, on full scholarship. So they are left to their own devices to pay their tuition, to pay their travel, to do all those things. That's, you know, when you open up the hood, there's really a lot of students who are in a tough place that this will provide a nice opportunity to, again, prosper off of their name, image, and likeness.
So last week, the Buckeye Club had a breakfast to, you know, talk about what's coming up and talk about NIL and things like that. And they brought the national championship women's hockey coach to this meeting. I knew we won the national championship. There was one player on her team from the state of Ohio. She was from Mason, Ohio, down near Kings Island. But Ohio State's never been above 500 as a hockey team, women's hockey, ever. They bring this lady from Minnesota. She comes here, COVID hits. She's got to deal with COVID and all that means. And 4 years later, she wins the first ever women's Big Ten championship and then goes on as the only time we've ever been the number one seed to win the national championship in women's hockey. Incredible accomplishment in 4 years. Will any of those players ever see an NIL dollar?
You know, it's interesting. I'll back up on that. It was really cool because that coach was public about a month ago, or right after they won it. She actually thanked the football team. She actually thanked the football team. She said, my girls are treated like NHLers as a result of the prosperity of the football team and what economy that creates. So absolutely. Early on, we're going to reach out to various athletes in terms of kind of building our message, branding. We're absolutely going to be reaching out to actually a women's hockey player as well as a female basketball player. We want to kind of be all things to all people, but I don't want to mislead. We've got to get football right. I'm not, I don't want to dupe anyone. If we get football right and we gain scale, we absolutely are already working on tools to provide every athlete the ability to monetize their followers, their social media followers. So hopefully that helps.
She thanked, we got to meet the new defensive coordinator, Knowles, that day, and she made a point of thanking him, even though he's brand new and hasn't technically done anything yet, because she said, I know all the money you bring in is what lets me have the facilities and the coaches and all the resources that I needed to take a sub-500 team to a national championship. She was very clear about that. It was really cool to see. So along those lines, Ohio State is a perennial top 4 team with Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia. Perennial. And, we've had that the old way. Now we have this new way. And all these Ohio State coaches, we got to talk to Hartline last week, who's the wide receivers coach, Knowles, the new defensive coordinator. Every one of them stood up there and said, we don't know what's going on. It's just so new. And, but what does this mean, in your opinion, for Ohio State? Does this hurt us, help us? Where's our dominance 5 years from now? Are we more? Are we less?
Yeah, it's a good question. If anything, I think to a degree from what I've been able to witness, it dilutes our focus on coaching and doing all the things that these coaches have been brought in to do. This is a whole new spoke that's non-optional. It's absolutely necessary. It's what we have been served up. So there's not a single coach at Ohio State who signed up for this. And to succeed at least over the next 3 years, there's got to be focus, and we have to be intentional to almost, before this changes in a big way, which we could talk about in a second, for the next 3 years, we need a Band-Aid to a degree to cope with this, to put ourselves in a position where the first question in athletes asking any of these questions is, what's the NIL environment? What's not facilities, not academic support, not professional development. This is the real part. What's going on in NIL in Columbus, Ohio? So Gene, the athletic department, not to speak on their behalf, but my sense is they believe it's a 2 or 3 year problem. And then after 2 or 3 years, this is going to get solved, and there's already people talking at very high levels amongst conferences and universities, because this has caused chaos for not only Ohio State, but everybody. So it's equal chaos. But there's, at some point, it's going to have to change sooner than later very drastically, because you can't instill a salary cap. You can't now limit what somebody can get paid. That's an antitrust lawsuit waiting to happen. You can't favor the football team and provide revenue flow through to the players. That's Title IX. What you do for the football team, you have to do for every varsity sport, male and female. So that's not the solution. So what it's going to look like, I would expect, there's probably going to be Ohio State, or not Ohio State, but football teams. It's 130 Division I schools. That's probably going to get divided up by at least 2 or 3 different ways, and they're going to be lifted out of the athletic department and not governed by the NCAA, but governed by some new governing board that can enter into a collective bargaining agreement to arrive at a salary cap and do things differently for the football team than they could for the other 35 sports. So this is a real problem that if we want to enjoy the success that we've had, that's what Ryan talked about last week. Ryan just kind of had the fortitude to talk about it in real terms. There was yeah, and how he arrived at that number is basically the top 3 or 4 programs in the country are spoiled. Like our depth chart, our second, third team, we are spoiled with so much depth and so many great players. The top programs, the Alabamas, Ohio States, Clemson's, Georgia, they are just so talent rich. They're a prime target for other schools to poach our rosters. So what Ryan was really speaking of, honestly, was the fact that we have to be preemptive to offer them something before somebody else offers them. So the next transfer portal window is January 23rd. So in January of 23rd, it's very likely 50 or 60 Ohio State players can enter the transfer portal and kind of see what's out there, so to speak. And Ryan's just trying to, sound the alarms and be preemptive to say, hey, it's very reasonable to expect if we don't have resources, we're going to lose a lot of players, a lot of top players, and that's not conjecture. That's going to happen.
The number he threw out was 13 million. So that's what Ryan Day says we have to collect in the next year, I assume, to pay the players that are there so they don't leave. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's he's just taken his current roster, and based upon some of these NIL deals that are being presented to these 4- and 5-star athletes, and he just put basically a dollar number to what kind of the current marketplace is. So that's kind of the $13 million math. So it's not exact, but it's an estimate of the problem. So
and walk me through the technicality of how this works. If I want, gosh, I can't even, my mind's going blank on players' names. Let's just say C.J. Stroud. That's what I'm thinking of. I want him to get my dollars because I like him. He's my favorite. I don't donate to Ohio State to get him the money. I have to do it through this third-party foundation, the Cohesion Foundation?
No, this is also very important. That would not go through Cohesion Foundation, a foundation for which I'm sure several of you sit on boards, could not be a pass-through to an athlete. So our goals, which are publicly stated, is with the incoming class of 23, we want to provide an NIL opportunity of somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 a year. That is not chasing athletes with $500,000 or $1 million. A 501(c)(3) cannot act that way. That's not proper governance. It's not fair value. That would be a sham. So in our lane is very specific. We're very focused. How that's going to happen is another for-profit entity that can approach corporate brands and then represent, that athlete in a for-profit sense. So there's what's called NIL management companies. They're for-profit companies that enter into a relationship with XYZ Bank, and the bank gives the for-profit NIL management company $250,000 to spread amongst 5 players. Then that money could come in, and it could be then paid out to the athlete. As a 501(c)(3) Cohesion Foundation, we have multiple strings attached to our behavior. And my board, myself, we are working in a very compliant, pensive way to stay in our space. All of this chasing of these huge deals, those are not coming, or they shouldn't be coming through 501(c)(3s or foundations. It's kind of a whole different spoke in the wheel.
So if Ohio State needs $13 million to pay our athletes, Ohio State Athletic Department's going to be the one that pays the athlete that money. They'll get it from somewhere, but they're going to be the one who pays it?
No, Ohio State. Yeah, these things are completely separate.
Okay.
Separate from any involvement with the university paying the athletes. It's going around to corporations, individuals, donors, sharing the problem, sharing hopefully the solution, and then formulating the proper architecture, to execute those NIL deals.
Okay. So when C.J. Stroud got his fancy car this weekend, that wasn't Gene Smith giving that to him. That was
Yeah.
a donor of some
kind.
No,
I'll tell you this, and I will swear on the flag in the Bible. I've been around Ohio State football for 40 years. Ohio State is a compliant institution. Have over 40 years, whether it's Ohio State or other things, have things on the margin occurred, that are impossible to regulate. $100 handshake 25 years ago from a restaurateur or somebody who, I don't know. I've never saw evidence of that, but I'm not going to be ignorant. But I could say institutionally, Ohio State University is absolutely committed to being compliant and following the rules. Whereas I'm not so sure with some of this other banter going around, and I don't want to offend anyone. I already offended some people because I cited the SEC in one of these speeches. But there are areas in the country where there's probably, I think you could connect some dots, you're nodding your head, where there's been some really funny business transpiring for a long time. And I'm not going to name names, but I think
Saban just called Texas A&M out, Jimbo Fisher.
well,
a couple weeks ago.
I mean, again, I'm not going there. I'm not going to speak negatively about Jimbo or Saban or Alabama or Texas A&M. But everybody here, I would sense, is very well educated, and you could connect dots. And it's almost, I don't know, it's almost humorous that these two are the righteous ones now. I don't know. Again, no evidence, but again, there's kind of been you could just hear and listen and
I will
observe
vouch
things.
for my next door neighbor was playing. She graduated from Watterson High School. She went to play on the Ohio State golf team. I'd never gotten to play golf with her. She said, "Oh, of course, I've always wanted to play as so and so." And I said, "Oh my gosh, my church is having a golf outing at that course in June. How about you be on my team?" And she's like, "Great." And I said, "I'm going to put together a team of ringers. We're going to win my church's golf outing. It's like $100 per person. It's like $400, to play in it." And I said, "You're in. I'll get 2 other people. We'll play in this outing." An hour later, her dad comes over, knocks on my door, and says, "Mike, what the heck are you thinking?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Gina can't play in your church golf outing. She's a scholar athlete at Ohio State University. You're a booster, supporter, whatever. This is how," and this was back when, oh my gosh. Who's the running back? Maurice Clarett, got in trouble. And she's like, "This is how Maurice Clarett and all these athletes get in trouble by people like me, innocently." And I said, "It's $100. And she called, this on a Sunday. We're out both mowing our lawns, and she called her compliance officer and found out on a Sunday at 2 o'clock that would be illegal. So, of course, I said, "Well, listen, you keep babysitting my kids, and I'll just tip you an extra $5 until I cover the $100. And she goes, "You're the problem," or her dad saying, "You're the problem."
There was a national show or somebody, a pundit talking about, oh, Ryan Day knows the number because he knows the number it takes to manage a roster. That is so like some inference of that's what Ohio State has done. I'm telling you, it's wrong and it's outrageous to make that inference historically. The thing is, Ohio State is fully committed to following this moving target, competing. Ryan and other coaches are competing against coaches who are not fully compliant.
Sure.
That's just real. It's the truth. So it's really hard. And now instead of us competing against 4 or 5 teams for the same marquee players, you now have Tennessee, you have Texas A&M, you have Oregon, you have all of these schools that some of them have been they really haven't been relevant for 20 years. And now they're desperate. They see this as we're going to buy success and we're going to buy a national championship. So this whole pool of who you're recruiting against has just expanded. And I think a bit, Jimbo and Nick Saban, they've kind of had a monopoly a little bit. And now their monopoly is a bit threatened. And that's why I think you're seeing such emotional, visceral type reactions.
Yeah, we'll have time for questions, and then keep in mind we're going to pass the basket because we got to raise $13 million. So get your wallets
It's so
ready.
funny. I got this caveat when I was invited. Don't ask for money, and I was like,
No, every speaker gets a caveat.
yeah, exactly. I was like, listen, I didn't come here, but now that you mention it, I have a huge basket. Yeah, no.
What does the development department anticipate the effect on it will be over having to raise this additional funds from corporate sponsors?
So the question for those online is, what's the effect on the Ohio State Development Department as they have to raise these additional funds?
Yeah, it's a very valid question, a very obvious question. It's a new spoke. It's a brand new spoke, and I know Ohio State is about to embark on some new facilities, as they perpetually are, and the messaging to corporations, boosters, donors, whatever you deem the supporters, it's not one or the other. It's really all. It's really all. It's again this NIL thing, which I don't think anybody feels good about. Like, I haven't met anyone that feels good about it. But if there are some really good aspects to it to help student athletes, and if we could help student athletes who need that, and we can foster and build and have them support in their duties, charities, which will help our community. It's very much a positive, but it's a kind of a fine line. Some of these buildings are 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. Hopefully this is a 2 or 3 year issue where over 3 years, hopefully we can raise $20-30 million over 3 years. That is a little more finite, I think, than some of the huge capital projects. So it's hopefully we could split it up a little bit.
Gary, you clearly defined that the university can't receive any of this revenue from NIL. You said there can't be any caps on the players for NIL. What are the guidelines? I've read nothing on NIL. I just catch all the hearsay. Are there any guidelines for the player and that sponsor, or is it just a blank check?
The question is, what are the guidelines for the player, the donor and the player as it relates to this new transaction?
Sadly, I don't think there's any, I know there's no guidelines. Like Tennessee, literally, this will make you look at your lunch twice. They signed a quarterback. That's an $8 million deal. They did an $8 million deal, $6 or $8 million to an incoming quarterback at Tennessee. Again, the space cannot be defined by these one-off aberrations. That's just not what's going on in mass. But there's really, Callaway, there's really nothing. There's no guidelines. It's a free capitalistic market, and right now there are no buffers.
Yeah.
We're talking about the tools that you're going to provide for athletes. What are some of those tools?
Well, we're talking with a software development company that actually has an app, like a TikTok, or these kids love TikTok, Snapchat, all these type of things. It's a tool in which all of these kids have social media followers, or most of them do, but there's not a way for them to monetize their followers. So this would have an athlete, maybe it's an athlete from a small town, which maybe all 300 people from that small town follow that hero, what they would construe as a hero from their town. If they were able to get their followers to their app, to their personal NIL app, that athlete can post content, and that follower, specific to supporting their NIL space, would seamlessly be able to what's called boost them $1, $3, $5, $10, $15 for content, whether it's good deeds or interesting things. There can be kind of a direct way for these people, depending on, I think, how hard they want to work their social media presence, to, for the first time, not only have followers, but to monetize those followers.
Time for one more, Terry.
Reveal my ignorance. Back to the basics. From the corporate sponsors' perspective, what's in it for them?
So the question is, what's in it for the corporate sponsor?
What's in it for the corporate sponsors? We've leaned in, and we are, I think, talking to the obvious here in Columbus. They want give back, so they want support of their foundations. They want support of good deeds. The Mid-Ohio Food Bank. That's what interests them. It's estimated that the Ohio State football economy is a $400 million economy. So everybody, whether you love Ohio State or you're not from Ohio State, every business owner has a vested interest in keeping this economy healthy. But I think what interests the corporations most is Ryan's clear messaging that we want good deeds, support, accountability, to local charities, whether they're the 10 largest or the 10 smallest. So that's what interests them so far from the feedback.
Sorry we're out of time. Let's thank Gary Marcinick for being with us today.
Great. Thank you for indulging me. I will see you all next week for my very last meeting. Or is it? Just kidding.